Hello everybody and welcome to another On the Workbench session. I think this is something really different for you here. You know how it is, I like to try and do different things, and actually I've got a number of these to do, and I thought this could be fun for you because yes, it involves weathering, but there's also sort of a whimsical edge to this here because as you can see we've got sort of that classic powder blue pickup truck thing going on here. Yet it's also a Mad Max style vehicle. I don't know who makes this, and I don't know what game it's going to be used for. It's just another one of those commission things. That's how it goes. But there's a whole bunch of them, and here's one that's already been finished. And you can get a general gist of what it is that we're looking for. You got the rusty dusty look. That's what was requested. See, we got a little bit difference here in between the spare and the one that's being used. There was nothing tremendously complex here because there's a whole bunch of these to do, and it was requested that they not cost $1 million a piece to execute, so that's why we try and do the most with the least on these things to keep the cost within the more of a reasonable range because there's a lot of these suckers to do. Now we're going to be using the usual liner paints from Reaper. Red liner, brown, blue, gray, sepia, that whole thing. There's your sepia liner. But for what I've got left of my Secret Weapon weathering paints, we thought, well, let's throw some of these out there. You got your tire black, which in a way is a lot like the blue liner. I think this is red rust here, because there's old rust, red rust, and orange rust. Yep, there's your orange rust. So this must be red here. So what's left of that, we'll use that too. We'll probably throw in some of the Pro Acryls here, because I think you've seen enough things where it's just using one or the other. You're also going to see some of the weathering powders here. You can definitely, I think you can get a real good peek of that right there. See on the tire and everything. So an awful lot of the set, yeah, see how it is in that tire well right there? There you go, you can see that. So we're going to be doing a little bit of that too. And I think to do the classic powder, but we'll actually make it a little more of this mint green here, which might give it more of a greenish, but almost more of a turquoise look. That was my first thought, was the turquoise stuff. Obviously, makeup sponges and the number 8 rounds. Now the allergy things, those are still hitting me here. So if the voice does weird things, I'll just apologize for that in advance, and you'll just have to kind of bear with me on that. That's probably gonna happen at some point or the other. So if it sounds like I'm working on a cough drop or something while I'm talking, that's because I am. And we'll also probably make even use of some of these makeup sponges. Again, this is nothing that you haven't seen before. We're just going to utilize these maybe in a slightly different way. So the first thing we'll do is the initial glazes, shaded base coat, as we normally do. What we'll do is we'll throw in some of those initial glazes first, start to throw in some colors, and then we'll work from there. Obviously, something like a vehicle where you have a lot of weathering, sometimes that you jump the gun on a few stages, or sometimes those stages blend together. But in any case, we're going to get some colors out on the palette and get to this guy. Let's start in with our vehicle here. We got just a few things out on the palette. Brown liner here, blue liner there. It's a little bit of that transparent brown. Actually have snakebite leather, and that's the Fire Slayer flesh. That's the contrast paints there. Really more of a maybe addition to the weathering side of things. Got some tire black there from Secret Weapon. This is the mint green and the maggot white over there. What I'm going to do is just do some thinning down here of this stuff. That's the blue liner. I'm also going to have some of the brown over here. We're just going to, in effect, this combination is going to make more of a gray right here. And the idea, but behind that is down here, down in your, right back here in your payload bay. Just gonna hit this up here. we are not going to get real fancy because remember, time concerns, that's an issue. And since we're going to be putting so much in the way of weathering and rust and dust and everything else in there, this is more, think of it as just setting all that up. The best way to set up the rust and dust down in here is with darker colors. Now there's other types of weathering, mostly I guess though you would say the chipping, the streaks, that sort of thing. Now that sort of weathering, well, when you think about it, it's best set up with lighter colors. Well, we're going to have a lot of lighter colors outside that cap. See how much that's coming away? We could even get in here with one of these guys. Does a couple of things. First of all, make sure there's not stuff that's just going to pool in there. Well, and just take a while to dry. But let's get a scissors here, and I'll just cut that into an even different type of shape, and poof, there we go. So it does give that a little bit of shading, darkens it down a little bit. Let's just hit stuff like this. Like I said, I'm just going to take some of that away. We don't want to move it across this whole cab right here because, well, then it's just going to go across an area that we want to hit with that powder blue anyways. Let's just do this like so. That we might just leave it alone. I just took my finger and hit that. No big deal here. Let's just hit these. See, even there, that's obviously another logical place for some kind of chip action to be. We'll do that there too. Now you could have done this as, some kind of 1950s delivery vehicle or something like that. Could have given a different color. Or what was that? If like some of those crazy 1960s sitcoms where you had the junkyard guy, whatever, you could have a little sign on there that says so-and-so's junkyard. Yeah, this was just, if it was my stuff, those kind of things, I could get a little more adventurous with them. But as we discussed with those, what were they? The dragons, remember the gemstone dragons? The choice is not always going to be yours. And you just have to adapt with the choices at hand. And that's what we're going to do here. Now we could use the gray liner for this too. I just didn't really feel like putting out a third color. I have the brown liner. It works well with the chipping and other stuff too, so what the heck, why not use that? There's a secret weapon, a couple of those that work really well with chipping. It might be the dark wood. It's a really nifty, very much like brown liner. It's a really neutral, really dark brown. And that one's really fun. It works well for obviously so many other things besides just weathering. Because I know people say, well, secret weapon weathering paints, that's just for weathering. And that's really not the case. There's so much more you can do with those. Actually, and I'm pretty sure Kathy does the same thing too, that we take stuff like the tree colors, the light wood, old wood, and I think even some of the dust colors, and we'll mix those with the rust, yellow rust, orange rust, and those make some pretty nifty flesh tone colors. So that is something to consider, because remember, they're supposed to be on the muted side, right? They're supposed to be very matte. They're supposed to sink down into crevices. That's why they're weathering paints. Can't you see a whole lot of uses then when you transfer that to, well, you're going to paint a face? That doesn't matter what size, whether it's 75 mil, 28s, whatever. I can see a whole lot of uses then. I do it more often. It's just that I kind of used up a lot of those. I have to get a new supply of those. And you'll see them again. Yeah, I might do just a whole army painting series using nothing but the secret weapons, just to show how you can use what is labeled weathering paint as something much more than weathering paint. Now, who knows, this we might try and give that more of a chromier look, I guess you would call it, so that would be more, a little more along the lines of the reflected light. Certainly wouldn't be hitting that with any kind of weathering type things. We'll see how it works. Since there is, it's interesting because we're going to have all that sky blue color on the vehicle. I don't know how well that's going to work with creating reflections. If that was, the other vehicle that I showed you, that red one, it might almost work better there because much like the Lannisters that you saw with the Song of Ice and Fire, that might actually make an easier contrast. Now, what we could potentially do here on these headlights is, if I can find it, we use some of that pearl white. I think we have actually used that on some headlights on vehicles in the past. Now, I think it'll be more along the lines of bolt action vehicles. But that could be an interesting possibility there to give it just one extra bit of texture. Just gonna say the heck with it, just use my finger. Yeah, that's gonna be on the messy side, but who the heck cares? Let's go. I think this is one of the last pieces we're gonna be doing with sort of our homemade gray liner mix here. Then what I'll do is I'll switch off to, I'd say probably the tires. What the heck, we'll just use a sponge there. Good enough. And now the interesting thing is with these, you don't necessarily have to, well, I don't want to say water them down, but you don't have to thin them down quite so much. So here we're going to hit this tire right here. And there's nothing that says we can't then turn around and use this to darken some of our vehicle color too. Now, you do something like that. You can see I already started to do it on the bottom half of that tire. So leave the top half alone. Let's see what I'm doing here, and just sort of taking away a little bit of that. It's not like it's supposed to be full-on non-metallic metal or anything like that. But there is, I don't know, there's something that's a little bit fun when you do that. Let's get this last couple of tires in here. I don't see any spare tires around. I also don't want to get too involved with these because there's going to be the mud and dust on the tires here too. We'll just let that get down into that crevice there. It's better just to have a little bit of that darker paint there to show than have nothing but the lighter primer. And of course, primer wise, this is the same old Badger Steiner Res. I think I did do a little bit more with I didn't use the reinstated orange primer, which just really looks so much like rust, especially when you put a touch of the black primer in there. Really does look like rust. So, see, just a couple of quick brush strokes with that. Now, what we're going to do, just going to make sure that on the flip side of these things, we have a little bit of tire color because there's no actual shape there. What we'll do is take some of this, maybe even some of the blue liner, and a touch of this right here. That's that mint green. And you can see good, that's still on screen there. Now it's not going to be as translucent as all the stuff we've started with. Not quite so translucent, but it's going to help us establish a This might be one of the darkest colors that you see, actually. I didn't necessarily want this to be super bright powder blue or turquoise. It's almost best if it has a little bit of dinginess to it, because it makes more sense with all this other weathering stuff that we're doing. Otherwise, it would just be kind of out of place a little bit. Let's just, what the heck, we're gonna... No, I'm gonna leave actually the running board. We'll do that in the other color, but just to save time. And you know what? There may be times where I just say the heck with it. It's easier for me to just paint right over that and go back in later on. Yeah, we painted in some stuff over there. What the heck cares? We can go right back in there again. Because it really is the point of these videos, to just, well, we call it the myth-busting element, but just to make people feel a little less uptight. That oh my gosh, if I do not paint within the lines, black helicopters are going to show up on the lawn, and horrible things are going to happen. See, that's just not even worth it trying to go around those things. Just gonna say the heck with it. Doesn't really matter. Now, it's a little bit of it has to deal with the way these are sculpted and cast. I think you can see that there's a bit of extreme texture on these, where there's rivets. Those rivets are the size of what you'd see on a Golden Gate Bridge or something. I mean, they are massive, huge rivets. They're not little tiny dots. So I would imagine, things like this, they're probably 3D sculpted, because it's a whole bunch easier. It makes sense to do that. But one of the things that does happen with the 3D sculpted figure, I remember this back from Wild West Exodus days, is that for whatever reason, those rivets can really get to be outsized. And I know every time I do one of these workbench things, it seems that I'm railing on the sculpts or whatever, or the casts. Well, again, these are the things that you have to factor in, especially when it comes to, well, how do you price things? And I'm just talking about this because, well, you can pretty much see what I'm doing here. You don't need a detailed description of this stroke by stroke. Yeah, when you want to price something, you have to factor in, they say, well, factor in your time. Okay, that's great. But you need to factor in more than just the time of how long will it physically just take to paint something. You have to take into the fact, well, okay, if this was an ideal sculpt, or if there was more detail to this, it would take me less time. Because you look at this, and if it's the same size, or even very much looks like something else that actually does have much more details, where the rivets are really, really small, and these metal pieces don't stick out so far, your brain immediately says, okay, it's only this size. I'll just charge the same that I would as if it had more detail in it. And crazy as it may sound, the less detail something has, the longer it's going to take to paint, because you're going to have to paint in that detail. And that's not going to be so fun. So like here, I'm already going to think about reflecting some of the vehicle color in there. Now here, if I want to do these, there's a little bit of powder blue to these, and then there's the white walls too. That's going to be tricky in a way, because we got the weathering to do, but in some ways it kind of makes it easier because they don't have to be super perfect, because there's just going to be weathering on top of them. Now, I'll grab the brown liner here, get into this, and we'll just whack these running boards here. Maybe even, yeah, into these wheel wells. I'll just hit this pole thing here that's up along the sides of the truck bed. Sponge. Do some of that stuff. I know we got the another one of these guys to do. So we work that in. Now, that's gonna need to be darker anyways. So we have a decent little setup of darker colors here. I think I'm gonna actually hit that again. And then we'll just really quickly, and see I'm actually letting the powder blue that I threw in there mix together with my other color that I just threw on. Now down here I'd already used some brownish colors. Get in here with a few more and just create some variety in the shading here. Now, yeah, the camera's going to shake a little bit here, so I apologize for that. I'm going to take some of that away. See, it's adding a little bit of brown to this. Don't have to get too crazy about it because, well, it really makes sense. If we're going to do anything down here, let's say something like the weathering powders, do more of the talking down here. That's more than good enough. Now what we'll do is we'll let some of this actually maybe even dry for a little bit before. Well, now we'll go in with a few more layers of our blue. Just wanted to show you another one here. So now here is one where I just decided to, wasn't sure what color that I wanted, so I just threw this green over the top of it. Then I'll do what we just did with one of these metal parts here with that blue and brown liner. You can see I started to do that over here. You can see we got the tires and such. But this one I just wanted to see, well, how light does that green need to be? How dark maybe should it be? I'm going to take some of this mint green. We go over here. Take just a touch of that blue liner. And who knows, that maybe I will throw, if I find some kind of more of a true blue type color, maybe we'll throw that in there. That's something I'll look for in between segments. Don't really want to take the time to do that now. And this already, see how much lighter that's going to look. It's not really that much lighter. As far as how close is it to white. I don't really have to worry about getting close to the lines here because there's going to be that weathering element in there. There's an awful lot of ways that weathering can really conserve time for you. Now, it is something, though, that you have to think of early on and always keep in mind, because we always talk about how it's that chess match with the weathering. You have to think in advance. So I have to think about, okay, where would chipping, streaking, any kind of rust, where would that be? And then this potentially poses that added challenge of, well, what if you are trying to preserve some form of some kind of chrome that's either on bumpers or on the hubcaps or one of those play areas there. And obviously these are prime areas for some chipping. Even here where that's going to meet that joint, I'm not really going to worry too much about it because I can get some dust down in there. If this were a pristine vehicle, well, then I'd have to give that a whole lot more thought. But fortunately, that's not going to be the case here. And much like the oils there, I'm even going to let the existing paint color there mix in. What the heck, I might even just go over this a little bit. Because once, let's say, some rust streaking or dust goes over the top of that, what are you actually going to see of it? Besides not much. But still, it's going to give you that visual of that powder blue pickup truck, the classic pickup truck look there. And those are my search parameters when I looked for that image over there. I think I just typed in classic powder blue pickup truck, and that's what immediately showed up. Yeah, not trying to sweat any details on it. It's for a pretend game based on a pretend movie. So, and you can see it's mixing in a little bit with the darker colors there. So it gives it that, I guess, a little bit of free shading. These are solid resin. These aren't plastic, so yet another reason why just with resin vehicles, now sometimes it can be interesting because you can either have extreme details and then it's sort of wobbly. Yeah, see how the wet paint is mixing in there? No big deal. Actually going to put some of that here too. Just for the heck of it. Do the same thing on this side. Not really going to fret it because of all the powders and other effects that are going to go over the top of that. Now I could also go, one or two steps lighter with, after this, with the shading of the powder blue. Maybe I'd do that. But in some ways it does make a little bit of sense to see how other parts of this are playing out. Like these extra steel plates that have been added, or even maybe not some of the chipping, but other effects. Right there, it's more about making sure. Let me just get rid of some brush strokes there. Here, I'm going to grab a touch more of that. And there is definitely, believe it or not, I can go much lighter with this. It doesn't seem that way. That's that whole notion of the context of things. Even some of these panel lines here, I shouldn't get myself too hung up on those because, well, that's where the rust and chipping and dust, all that, I can bring those in to help define those. There is no reason to get all worried about that right now. Here's again, we're doing a little bit of, even now, starting to think about some sky blue up there. I could use some of there's a bunch of Secret Weapon products. There's old oil and oil discharge, all that. Maybe we use some of that up here. Maybe that's something that could be fun. There's also the blue heat, the purple heat. I think there's the orange heat or whatever. Those are fun for getting that on chrome to get those heat effects. To me, actually, those work really well actually on metallic paints, because they, you mix a little bit of that. There's transparent, so that's the nice thing. They tend to go over. See, what the heck? Right here, I'm just gonna say the heck with it. I'm just gonna go right over that. Same thing with this chain here. If it's gonna be rusty and everything else, why should I just get that crazy about it now? Same thing with these plates. It's actually handy that they're already darker underneath. It's just so much easier for me to not have to paint around them. I've seen people just painstakingly and very painfully painting around stuff like that, when you could just say the heck with it and just do something like this. And yes, I know that's all messy and such, but think what we're doing here. Think of just how much weathering. You saw that other test vehicle right there. And every single one of these is going to be very much the same way. Now here, I know I've got some wet paint sitting down in here, and I may just let that mix in with the new colors that I bring in. I think you can see, yeah, you can see that. Let's get the, right here, the back of the, there we go. And here again, I don't care about these surfaces that are above that. We can go over those again. We can just make those super rusted, oxidized bars of metal by comparison. Yeah, whatever. That's another reason why I try not to get too, at these early stages, too worried about painting specific things, because it's real easy to move this thing around and all of a sudden you can feel that the brush just hit something. Like it just did there. And it was so inconsequential, I didn't even care. Didn't even try to wipe it off. So let's go to something that's maybe a little bit more straight up mint green. You can see how much lighter that is, and we have not added any of the maggot white to that. This basically here is about the last of what I'm going to do. I don't know if I really want to add the maggot white to this. So I don't think I'm really going to try and get that blue color in there. It's more of a reddish blue. I actually want this more of a turquoise look to it. It's more what I had originally envisioned anyways. But on top of that, I think it'll, color temperature wise, create more differences with these metals here, which I might actually then allow to be a little bit more on the reddish side instead of on the bluish gray side. See here, we're just gonna hit those, and this is more of a reminder than anything else on these hubcaps, that maybe those are supposed to be more on the shiny side. Here, let's just real quick do that. And you can see just how detailed and careful we're trying to be here, which is not at all. Let's get a little more of the mint green out here real quick. Like that. I'll hit a few spots here. here in the back of the truck bed. What I might do is more for just for demonstration than anything else. Mix in a little bit of the maggot white. And maybe on the roof and a few other places, just sort of show how much lighter we can still go than this. Because this really does look like, well, geez, you can't get any lighter than this. Because at this point we are pretty much at straight up mint green. There's some really crazy ones of these. There is one that's actually a school bus, I believe. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to do the entire thing, because it's a school bus with a whole bunch of stuff on it. But now you're getting into yellows and other things, so what would that be like to try and do the rust effects, dust effects, because that's, I mean, it's awful close to the actual color of some of the rust and certainly a lot of the dust. This, even though it's lighter, just the nature of this color at least still stands out from things like dust. You saw how there was that kind of brown and tan and reddish brown. So again, don't really fret about making things super smooth. I'll see folks, they paint stuff super smooth and everything, and then they do all this weathering and stuff to it, and it's you realize you could have saved a whole heap and chunk of time not worrying about painting that super smooth because of how you're going to beat the snot out of it with your weathering. I just sort of found that out myself as I was doing some of those type of things, and I said, nah, yeah, I could have saved some time there. That really was pointless. What little of the so-called pristine surface showed, that I really could have just saved myself the trouble and the time. So again, in this bed here, I'm not really going to fool around too much. Even you're not necessarily going to try and get everything super perfect. Look at this. Just going to add a few hits of that maggot white in there. My goodness, that really made that lighter. Now I'm going to hold it this way because otherwise, wow, holy smokes. That makes a huge difference. Wow. I almost have to get some more of the mint green back in here and go back the other way because that is massively lighter. I knew it was going to have an effect. I just didn't know it'd have that much of an effect. So let's do some quick little shading things here on vertical surfaces. I can even use my finger to try and blend some things. Like I said, areas like this, these corners and such, they're rounded, yes, but they're still going to get some scratches and some other types of weathering. Some of that. Oh, what the heck? We'll go right down in here. Because it still has to translate as powder blue here. I don't want it to start to look like white or whatever. So this is by far the lightest I want to go at all with this. Now we're just about good to go here, because as always, I try to keep these individual little film segments like this. Try to keep them ideally at 30 to 35 minutes. We're at the 35-minute mark right now, actually a little past that. So I may do a few brush strokes off camera here, but I think that gives you the general gist of how we set this thing up. And remember, this is with some of the brightness is turned down on this. So just imagine how much brighter that could be. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to start to work on some of these other metal surfaces here and get those all set for the initial stage of the weathering, the rust and such. So we'll be right back with that in just a second. I turned off some of the lights here so you can get a little more sense of the shape that's going on with this. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to go in here with our brown liner now. The blue liner, take the maggot white here. You can see we're making an entirely different kind of gray. This is a much warmer gray. Let's get in here. And you can see that as dark as that looked on the palette, doesn't look quite as dark over here. But it does give us a real nice difference in between. And just hit the hinges with that, why not? Let's get the things like the running boards here. Remember, I can always just throw a glaze onto that. We've got all of that rust and everything that's gonna come up too. Even the rods here. Now maybe those are supposed to be more in the line of, let's say, chrome. But I'm just gonna say where those are, they're gonna really get kind of beat up and abused. So even just right there, even just that changes all of this area so much. Yeah, let's get these are your machine gun type things here. Now this may be a little bit less with the rust and dust. I might just hit that more with some regular glazes. Maybe have more of a heat effect on that than anything else. Chain over here. Just hit this grill. Now let's get some of these bits right here, because this stuff that's all just gonna be rust right in there. I'm not gonna screw around with a whole bunch of extra things. It'll just take up time and mostly be covered anyways. That is, I guess this, in a way, it ties in with all of the Army Painter stuff, where we make those assessments of, is it really worth it to do this effect? Yeah, it'll look really fantastic, but okay, this is how long it took. And then, well, did it really show up? And now that I'm starting to, with some of those units, especially the Song of Ice and Fire stuff, now that those are starting to go out on the table, it's been real interesting to see, okay, yeah, I've figured that out right. I didn't go too far towards the area or that zone where things are just not visible. Yeah, they're there if somebody's looking at an individual figure and they're looking at it real close up. The boy on the table, you don't see it at all. So I think I was able to manage that pretty well. Now that I'm actually seeing those guys out on the table here, you know what the heck, I'm just going to hit it with this same gray. And what's interesting is on the palette it looks so much darker, I would say, than this mint green color that's now behind it. But yeah, for whatever reason, once it's on here, it doesn't necessarily look all that much lighter. Let's see, look at that. Just a quick little graze right over the top of that. Not a dry brush because there was still plenty of paint in there. It was the angle of the brush plus the fact that we're using this type of much bigger brush. It lets you do that really shallow brush stroke like that, do some of that feathering type stuff. Now we've got the deck plate here. I want to get a little bit of water in there. Can't do too much, otherwise it's just not really gonna... It'll just cover up the whole thing. I'm going to be going over this with some lighter colors yet, so not so worried about that here. Again, don't have to worry about being super careful because, wow, there's just going to be all kinds of weathering stuff happening here. I just want to get a little bit of variation in things. If I get the metal too light, we want this all to actually be kind of dark in here because you hit it with your rust and your dust. Then that's when you hit it with that lighter stuff, and that's where you sort of indicate, okay, well, if somebody's been walking around in here, what they've done is sort of scrape away maybe some of the rust and the oxidization that's going on, instead of, well, it just, well, it's back to the color of the bed of the vehicle or whatever. Here, now we can actually throw a little bit of water on here just to get that to flow a little more. So again, while the color value is relatively the same, the color itself is really different, and that's why we are going to do one of our little tricks right here and just see what happens when we do, boom, that. So you can see now it is actually a little bit darker. And then once it's, here, let's get another grade lighter here. When it gets too light, I'm going to take some of the blue liner there. That still is going to shift it to a different type of gray. Maybe I don't want all of these the same type of gray. Like here, maybe I want this to be more of a bluish gray, but it's going to be a red blue, if that makes any sense. Here, let's get this window over here. Like I said, not really sweating out the details on this because there's so much that's going to change with the weathering stuff. It's when I was doing that first one, that red vehicle that you saw, I kept telling myself all the same things I'm saying here. I said, yeah, okay, don't worry about this, don't worry about this. And then I actually did the weathering stuff, and I went, holy smokes. All that other stuff that I did, that just doesn't show up anymore. So even I just wasn't able to fully visualize in my head how much change there was going to be when I added in those new colors. See how that changes things. So, here, let's take some of that blue liner. This is still the same old maggot white, but now this is a different type of gray here. Now at this point it may not look quite so different. May not look so different. I'm just going to hit some of the grill there. So even some of these things that all of before looked like, well, man, there's just no shading there. Now they'll start to look like, well, yeah, they actually do have a little bit of shading. I'm just going to say that's, well, maybe do some kind of faux license plate thing in there. If there's time, we'll mess with that. I don't necessarily think you want this to turn into a 3-hour extravaganza. It doesn't bother me because, well, I have to do this. This has to get done anyway. So whether it takes 4, 5, 6 hours, it doesn't matter to me. But I'm not sure that you necessarily want to devote that much of your time to this. And now I'm gonna go straight into the maggot white there. Some of this may not really show up all that much, even though I have the brightness turned down and I've got the saturation turned up, and like I said, I killed actually a few of the lights so that you could see that a little bit better. And at this point you can see a little bit of oblique here. Brush strokes just designed to catch a few lighter areas on things. But there's still enough of that. Basically, I haven't washed the brush since we started, so there's still enough of that brown liner that's sitting in this brush to affect this and actually make it seem a little bit on the reddish side. Because don't consider any of these things final highlights, final colors. I don't even care. I'm just going to wipe some of that away that hit over there. Now let's just get a little bit more of the maggot white out on the palette here. Come on, there we go. And gonna get some on this. Remember, we were thinking maybe this should be something that has a little bit more of a chrome look to it. So at this point, that's all I'm gonna do is start to think about things maybe have a little more chrome to them and just start to lighten those things up. How's about this? On a few of these parts of like our machine gun bits here. Maybe not this over here. Because like I said, I can do some glazes over the top of this and give that actually more of a blue look to it as opposed to a turquoise teal look. Yeah, let's hit these couple of areas here real quick. Remember, we got the sort of plating right here that we're going to do. All it is, just make it lighter so that when we do get the rust effects on there, that's what we do with a couple of different things. We'll do it with some of the secret weapon stuff. Oh, we'll do it with the, maybe even mix in a little bit of the contrast paint stuff. There's so many different ways to do it. You could do it just with some of the liner paints. I've done it with the clears. Because you're just not always going to have the thing that you need with you. It happens to me all the time because I have to paint outside of the studio all the time. Maybe for you guys that's not going to happen so much. Yeah, okay, let's say maybe we do want to, just for the heck of it, well, we got the maggot white out here. I just hit these because as soon as I start to put the weathering colors over the top of those, then they're really going to fade to the background. And if you ever get something, here I got my scissors here, so you got something like this. See that little here on the end of that? Boom, that's gone. And since it's a brush that costs 35 cents, if something were to go horribly wrong when you cut that, well, okay. Your 35-cent brush has a little bit of a cut mark on it. Big deal. Just grab another one. In most cases, it's going to be either just fine for that or even better for something else. I suppose too that that's the other reason I wanted to show this. It's a bit of a sneaky lesson in, oh gosh, and I hate limited palette, but just a condensed palette exercise. We'll refer to it as that. Because it is, we're not doing there's not a lot of reds in here, although I guess if you consider all the rust effects and such that'll be added, that and the dust, that's where you start to fill out your color spectrum a little bit. The other vehicle, well, it was heavy on reds. So there, it was tougher to get things like rust to show up at all. Down here, you got just the opposite going on. Is really going to stand out. That's a little bit more because here you've got, well, the backdrop is going to be lighter because of the light blue, but you also have a pretty darn muted color, I would say, a very desaturated color behind it. Now, let's say that green vehicle that I showed you, we're doing that. Well, that changes things because that green that's got a little bit of punch to it, that green. And that means now anything that has that reddish orange, well, that's really going to contrast with it. You have to keep that, kind of keep that front and center in your mind as you go ahead with things like the weathering effect. Not much more of this going on here. Like that. Yeah, just get a couple of these last few rivets done. Now here, I'm just going to do this because I'll actually mix the pearl white and the red together for those. I want to put the pearl white over the top of that. It'll give it it won't make it necessarily lighter or darker. I'm not even sure if it's going to show up on camera or not, but it will, at least in person. It'll create a difference between some of the rust colors there. That sort of a texture. Because that's the other thing about the Secret Weapon paints is that even the texture is supposed to match what rust is, and rust is, it's not just super matte, but it almost has a little bit of grain to it. It's not that the Secret Weapon paints are grainy or anything, but it has that very flat roughness to it that if you were to just take regular paint and paint the exact same color, your eyes would say, okay, that's the right color for rust. But then your eyes would also say, it may be the right color, but there's others, it's not quite what rust, my mind says that rust is. So let's see how much lighter we can get with things like these hubcaps and such. And that is not pure white. We have not touched that at all. Alright, so we're going to get some of this. That's the brown liner again. I'm going to see if I can't get one. Here we go. One step lighter here. And this is not everywhere, but see how that changes? Look at how red that is by comparison. I'll put that in a few areas here. Not on every single one, not all over every single one, but here and there. Now the other one, it was more towards the top. Here it's more towards the bottom, and you see how it's got almost a hammered look to it. That's the other thing I was looking for. So again, that warms that up a little bit. Doesn't necessarily change the overall lightness or darkness of it, but it sure does. Here, let's just mix that in there. So now I've got a few different colors of, basically a few different colors of metal here. See, it's more of a bluish. And as it gets lighter here now, it's a bit more warm. And we're continuing with some of that kind of hammered look there. Like it was almost sort of hammered in place or whatever. Get some of this on these other pieces around here. Well, we still have our tire black and blue liner. What's that for? Well, that's going to go right over here. And there are a few other tire colors if you want to get these things lighter. I have this stuff out here. Why not utilize it? I'm actually going to use a little bit of that lighter brown color there, and you can see what we're doing. We're emphasizing sort of the bottom area of these wheels. Not going to worry too much about perfection, because when the dirt and mud hits this, what are you going to see of all this perfection? Not a whole lot. Let's go another step here. And you can see that diminishes with each pass. A little bit less. We'll do that here too. Yeah, don't worry about just taking your finger and mixing stuff around. It's there. Might as well use it. If you had a wing or a claw, you wouldn't be able to use it. But you got fingers. And they're kind of handy. And yes, pun intended. Now, we've got yet another form of that grayish blue. See what we're doing here? We're just... What the heck? Let's just pop in some of these extra little... Look at over here. Why not fool around with that? See, over here. It's a way to get a little bit of interest in something that is just what the eye's going to say, it's just gray. It's just gray. That's boring. There's nothing going on there. Here, we're actually getting a little bit of essentially a sky earth thing that's working there. Let's go back in here real quick to do like what we've got on that opposite side there. Here, let's grab some of the maggot white. And just real quick, do something like that. On here. I might actually even lighten that up a bit more. Look at this. We're doing wet into wet. You didn't think you'd have all this kind of stuff going on with a Mad Max pickup truck in classic powder blue video. Surprise, surprise. And what we are going to do now is say enough of this. We're going to get out some of those secret weapon colors. We've already got the GW stuff sitting in these couple of deals here. So let's start to fool around with some of our rust colors next. Let's do some more stuff with the rest of these metals here. Now I do have those couple of secret weapon colors that we were talking about here. Those are out on the palette now. Here, let's get that more centered. But I also wanted to, here I'm going to take some of the brown liner, some of the blue liner here. I'm just going to get into some of these spots here with some darker glazes. Like this. Oh, let's grab ourselves one of these. And that now starts to set some of these things apart here. We'll do the same over here. You can see that this is relatively under control here. We're not just blindly slapping around a bunch of darker colored liquid. We're being pretty targeted with it here. And the idea is that this, as we mess around with the rust in some of the other places, that dries. So here, let's do that same type of thing right in here. Yeah, sorry, my voice is definitely going to be a little bit messed up just because. Let's go over here. Just got some water here. I'm going to take that brush and see if we scumble some of that away. But enough of that remains behind. It doesn't take a whole bunch to create a whole bunch of shape. Oh, wait a minute. That could be another verse with it. Doesn't take much shading to create a whole bunch of shape. Oh, that's catchy. That's pretty catchy. I like it. And I'm going to do that same thing over here. See how we get a little bit of nice separation there. All this happens because we were willing, well, at least I was, in that initial phase to let things look just a little bit chaotic. Some would say super messy, but I like chaotic better. Let's do a little bit of this. And we'll see I'm doing that in the corners of the bay here. Now the reason I'm doing that is because then your rust, which is going to be lighter than this. Oh, how can I say it? Rust, sometimes it's neat when it looks darker than its surroundings, but then when it's also lighter than some of the shading around it, there's just, I don't know, there's a little extra something. Little extra something, not quite sure exactly what that is. Now on these guys, maybe not as much. You can see I just took some water. Wiped a little bit of that away, but you know, my hinges. Now even if I want to start to bring in things like, oh yeah, that. Once again, this is mostly just water here. Can wipe away some excess. Let's get ourselves some door handle action there. Yeah, wipe that away. It's another way of getting some shading in there fast. Because sometimes, especially with these things now, if it is some super detailed 75mm figure, Well, when you think about it, yeah, you really you want to be a little bit more precise than some of this, but that's also an entirely different circumstance. Or if you're doing a model kit that has a lot of precision parts in it, well, you shelled out the money for a model kit because it had the precision parts. So, well, okay, there it makes sense to take advantage of such a thing. But here there's not as much in the way of detail anyway, just by the nature of the cast and the sculpt. Changes our outlook a little bit. Also, we have a different, well, basically a different task to perform here. So now we're gonna switch away from the, I'm looking for a spot here on the palette. This is the blue liner. And now that will shift this. It's not just darker, it's changing the color. This now has a little bit of a bluishness to it that is unlike all the bluishness around it. Let's get some of that removed there. So nice. Again, changes the look of things a little bit here. We can even hit that on some of these tires. Can even here give a little bit of that. Let's do some of that on this chain. And I can get rid of some of the water and the liquid in there and go back and affect things in other ways. Now we're going to go back to something that's a little more on the brown liner side here. Again, that's on that running board. Gonna do some of these bits here. Again, not gonna do too much of that. Here and there. And you can actually go in here then if you want to go in with the rust. Now you have a thing where you can actually let those blend together, and that's something I like to do. I'm going to try and do that here, see if it'll work. And it's looking for a sponge here. Boom, like that. So this is a little bit of the, that's the GW, so we'll mix it into a touch of the secret weapon there. Now, let's go into probably one of the more obvious areas. Now, see, remember I talked about letting it mix in with the darker tones there, because now it's one way to, in some ways, create a little bit of that old rust, that much darker rust color. Here, all I'm doing, just put in a little more water into that. See, we'll let those mix. So look at how the rust color changes in there as it goes across the bed of that vehicle. Won't necessarily do this all at once either. Now this is more just the straight up, again, sorry about that, the GW, I think that is the Fire Slayer Flash. Here, let's do a little bit of that here. I think we take the brush now. Look at this, we just clean some of that away. I can even take my finger, wipe some of that away. So there, we can do that. So we can do the rust a couple of different ways. There's always different ways to approach things. Now this is more just straight up the secret weapon rust color there. It's mixed with a little bit of the snake bite leather. See, I'm not trying to completely wipe out those metal colors there, but just trying to give it a hint of rust there, like that. Now I've got actually a lot of the wet rust color down in here. Actually, I think you can see what I'm doing here. I'm cheating here a little bit. Instead of doing a stroke that goes straight down, I'm doing a stroke that actually goes up. Here, let's do some of that on this side here. Mostly because doing that upward stroke because it's easier to do just with the way this thing is oriented. See here, we'll just take some of that, we'll move some of that around. Watch, look at that. See how they're scumbling that around in the corner. Look at that. It looks a little bit like some kind of chipping or whatever is there's oil or something or fuel that's moved around in there. Speaking of which, here, let's run some of this along the. Take even some of this, mix it with the brown liner. But not in too many places. See, we got to get it a little bit lighter again. Because I want that to be rusted enough, I guess. Here, let's do. Right in here. So this is not the primary weathering thing. I'm just trying to do this one area. The rest is all this other chipping stuff. I'm going to do that maybe in a separate. Well, no, we'll just do this all here. Let's just do that as much as we can here. Here, let's. Again, that's the brown liner. Got a little bit of the secret weapon. Rust. And where I did the streaks, you can see, oh look, that's where I'm focusing some of the paint chips because, well, what would happen is, like here, okay, you got some paint chips, and all right, then you got the rust that sort of flows down from there. Makes sense. You try and do things that just make the most sense. Now here, I'm going to thin this down even a little more. And then come back in with the brush. So look at this. This is what the secret weapon stuff is really designed to do. You go back in like this. See, you push that around. That's what I enjoy. Now, other paints, yeah, you can do that. But the secret weapon stuff is specifically designed for things. Look at this. See how watercolory that is? When you do this with other paints, it just has a tendency to look like, well, barely watered down paint. You do it with the secret weapon stuff, it looks more like you've actually taken rust. See here, we're doing the same thing. This is the secret weapon stuff. Look at that. I know people, well, we do this with the oils too, right? But look at what the secret weapon stuff kind of offers. Maybe not everybody wants to use oils, or you don't have time for the oils to dry, that sort of thing. Well, then maybe that's where the secret weapon stuff becomes your friend. Here, we'll just, not every single rivet, not every single spot. But see how that creates now more shading in and around on this railing here. See, we just took a little bit of blue. We'll wipe some of that away. Doing the same thing here. So kind of by default now, see, we create a whole bunch of extra shading. Now up there, we had it hit where it wasn't supposed to hit. Well, okay. Yeah, that. See, we're just gonna dole out some chips there. I'm gonna start calling chipping and rusting to chips and salsa. How's that? So what the heck? I'm just gonna start doing that here. Now I could use a sponge for this also. And by sponge here, let's got a sponge here that's all dirty and stuff. We're just gonna start picking it apart. All right, we're gonna get a touch of the rust color in there. So sorry if the camera's shaking, but let's see what happens now. All right, we got that. See, on the leading edge especially. Poof. Right there, look at that, nice and random. Over here, oh yeah, look at that, nice and random again. Let's do that. I do in the areas where there's the most of it, or the most of it where there's more of it. And then as this starts to wind down a little bit here, so I'm focusing again on. Now let's change the shape of this touch. Okay, let's get the top edge of the roof here. Especially focus again on these wheel wells. And by having a bit of the rust, see how that just, look at that. I think now you can see why I didn't get myself too wrapped up in how perfect things were in those initial stages there. Now what if we just, we're going to rip this in a different way. See if I can get myself a little different shape here on some of these. Yep, oh yeah, that's good. Here, let's get the leading edge of this. Yeah, you can even hit some of those too, but especially along here. Because remember, it started all nice and nifty and powder blue, and then we realized, well, it's supposed to be a Mad Max vehicle here. It's not supposed to be all pristine. Now, we can even go in here. And let's just go in here and do a little bit of that. See how that ripped a little bit of a hole in there? I was hoping it would do that. I didn't know if it would or not. Fortunately, it worked out the way I wanted it to, because it's almost a little bit like that shipping fluid kind of thing. I know people do, what is it, the hairspray technique, and if you're looking for more weathering techniques and that sort of thing, you can Justin, the Secret Weapon Miniatures, they do their Wednesday workshop thing, so be sure to check that out. And obviously he's going to go into much more detail on specific effects, say, than I would, because he really loves his weathering and he really researches that. Me, it's more weathering for convenience sake. Like here, it's just, well, make it look weathered, like what we're doing here. See how we're just having those, having that go down like this. Here, look at this. Again, this is that secret weapon. Look at what that does. It's just, to me, it's so much like having some fun with watercolors again. Look at that. We can just do some individual streaks like that. So much fun. You can certainly now really get into these. We can get into this part of the, and look at this here. We'll just have some water sort of accumulated here, but then see how we wipe that away? Look at that. Again, another reason why I did not worry about having all this perfect shading there, because I knew this was coming up. Now let's see if we can, once again, assign some streaks to our chips. And look at that, see? You'd almost think we were working with water, oil paints right there. But we're not. We are not doing that. I do have to say though, like look at this, what we're doing in here. Look at that. This is, I don't want to say it's an acquired taste, but it's something that may take some practice. It's not going to be, but I hate to say as easy as this or whatever, but it's something you will have to try a few times because I had to. Like this deal right here, you know, that it takes a little while to really be able to just kind of do that quite this. Again, I hate even to use the word effortlessly. It's easier for me to do it than to say it. But again, with some practice, you know, maybe you just do it on some flat surfaces too. You take some, oh, I don't know, if you've got leftover, and this if you've got the 40K stuff. Let's say you've got leftover Rhino doors or things that have rivets and such that you're not even actually using on. I mean, you don't even have a Rhino, but you got the extra bits. Why not use the extra bits as practice? Here, look at this. Look at how we're using the side of the brush. We just look at that little, see those little dots of, that's kind of what rust does. And I suppose the reason it does it is because, well, rust is generated by water. We're using water here, so it kind of makes sense that the rust, or the painting part of this, is following how rust works naturally. Look at this. Yeah, see, that's nice and translucent there. See, we want to soften up some edges. We can. Alright. But as always, yeah, less is more, a lot is too much. All those things. Let's say we don't like what we have there. There's too much rust there. I'm just going to go in now with my regular paint color there. Look at that. Here, let's try that over here. We're going to take some of this, the blue liner, like that. Let's go right back in there. We're sort of going now back and forth. Look at that. There's even some secret weapon colors that are sort of this brighter, lighter bluish gray. And believe me, I've used them like this too. Here, let's let that mix together a little more. Yeah, look at that. See, and you'll see Justin do just this kind of thing with basically all the paint is essentially sort of wet, and it's a little bit of a watercolor exercise where the paint's just allowed to sort of mix together and do all kinds of fun things. You have to be willing, I guess, to let the paint do its stuff. And I realize that can be a scary type of thing. Because we're all sort of control freaks. We want to make things happen as we want. But there are times where you just have to sort of let it work on its own and do its own thing. Now remember, I don't want to be doing that there on the whole manifold thing and that cowling there. But what I do want is around it. See what I'm doing here with that? I suppose I could kind of do a similar thing with the weathering powders. You know, basically take a rubbing alcohol in there and do that. But the whole point of this is, what that's doing is gonna, see, we'll soften out that edge. But now it is definitely creating a difference between something that potentially is a more polished surface, like so, and things that are more rusted. Now let's maybe get in here with this lighter rust color. So this is the orange rust, and look at what's happening here. Remember we talked about having rust that's lighter on the outside here. Maybe I don't want to have that so much, but down in the bed here, it makes sense to do some of that, I think, because you really have water collecting in there. But now you can see it's almost like we're doing those oil glazes. Remember the pin line glazes, I think was what we called them, or pin glazes. See how some of those, that deck plating texture now, it's basically dark over light. And that to me was always the most interesting thing. Once I started to see rust treated in that way, that was pretty fascinating to me. We'll do it here in a few spots, just a couple. We'll do it here. We got that nice dark rust. See, look at that. That's what it's designed to do. What I just did right there. See, that's blending together. That's all good. All what we're wanting to see. Let's have some of that here. Go down into here. Now let's get, not necessarily rust color, but maybe more of just a dirt color there. And if at any point, let's say, oh man, I don't like that, the watery thing there. Well, you take your mint green, you go over the top of it. Here, let's get some mint green out there. Where's it at? It's over here. It's going to be a little bit like what we were just doing with the metals there. Here. Oh, let's go over here. It's already sort of wet a little bit. Look at this. See how we've now, there's no hard edge there. It's all gone. We'll go over here. Look at that. We take away a hard edge. It's pretty much what we were just doing with the metals. Here, let's do some of that here. See what that does? Look at what if we don't like some of our dots there. We just do that. There's always a way to sort of change something, modify something. Now here, let's see if I can do possibly some kind of reflected lights on some of this. And I want to be able to get to everything. I want to be able to get to the weathering side of things. So there's going to be stuff that you just won't see here. But I think you're going to get pretty much the general idea behind things. Yeah, how's that? It's kind of fun. At least I thought it was. Now, I have to say, just in general, and I noticed this initially, I didn't realize why, but way back in the day, and I'm talking a long time ago, say Golden Demons, every time you would see a vehicle, guess what? It's always either this color or some really light color, like light gray. And guess what? It allowed them to do all this kind of stuff that I'm doing here, all this streaky stuff, and everybody loved it. And then I would try and do some of that on vehicles that were red, or just some other color that were either darker or whatever. Then I realized, well, wait a second. It's not going to show up the same because it's red. It already killed all of this nifty stuff here that I did. How are you going to do that on a red vehicle? It's not going to show up. So I realized that the vehicle's colors were chosen specifically, carefully. However you want to term that. Alright, so I'm just going to do a little more with the rusty stuff here. Like that. Because we want to get into our want to get into our dust and everything else. I don't think we're going to do much with mud spatters on this. Maybe we'll do that on a... Like I said, I have a bunch more of these to do, so I hope you don't get bored watching these, because, well, you're going to see them. As I really do think that there is some value for you here. Again, we're just taking that secret weapon, the rust color in here, just dropping this around. Check that out. Really nifty. Again, it's almost like we're working with oils, but like watercolors, because what are we doing? We're taking all the paint out of here, and it's sort of like we're mixing and blending right there on the surface, aren't we? Yeah, I think that's not too shabby. Here, I'll just do some extra little fun things there. Let's get this going. We gotta do ourselves a little bit of... See how we take the paint away, and then we add some back. It's really fun to play around like this. I know for some folks it might seem really scary, because this is a little more, it's a little more free-form, I guess. We'll put it that way. You have to, in some ways, just be willing to let that paint do its thing. Here we're gonna really try and age some of these seams here, panel lines. This is, yeah, that secret weapon color. Got some of our brown liner in there. Here, let's really chip that up a bit. Looks a little bit different now, doesn't it? Just a little bit different. I might even still get myself some rust in there just to keep things. Now, see if we can't get ourselves a couple of streaks along there. Yeah, look at that. And then there's points. Let's say you want to go the opposite way. You take your... See, or taking the maggot white here, and you bring some areas back. Yeah, you go back and forth. That's kind of how this works. You have to sort of be flexible a bit. And yeah, I think we're just about there. Here, let's get ourselves a bit more. Let's get some lighter rust out here. So see how that's dark there, and now that lighter rust shows up that ordinarily might not. That's why we like having some of the darker tones out there. See if I really make that more of a wash, it shows up. Yeah, you could use a smaller brush too. Let's see what happens when we do that. See what we got right there? Just got ourselves a few smaller little rust lines in there. Again, some of these parts are really, I probably just want to let some dust get in there, but like I said, you can take your time. You don't have to zoom around like this. It's all about you and what you need. But I think that pretty well gets the point across. So what I'm going to do here is we'll get out the weathering powders and we'll just do that last little bit of dusty type stuff once all this dries. And then we'll be just about done with our very rusted powder blue Mad Max pickup truck. We're in the final stages of this. Our classic color scheme on this pickup truck. We have our painted on rust effects and chipping, all that sort of stuff. We want to finalize that with this sort of a thing, right? See, they got in the tires there, these areas. Just want to get some of those dust effects in there. Maybe not so much with the mud. It's supposed to be more of an arid type of a thing, which I know with all the rust streaks is ironic, but hey, you do what you're told. What I also want to do is get some of these head and tail lights in here. Now, remember I told you about the pearl white, which you've seen me use in some of the other videos. I'm just going to try a couple other things here. So I've got this. Actually, I want to see how it works with this. Maybe do some sort of semi-translucent effect on those. We'll see how that works. Maybe even mix a little of this in there to keep it warmed up enough. I also might play with a little bit of gloss stuff here, and I think I have some. Yep, there we go. Might play with some of this. You could use the Secret Weapon water effects to a realistic water, but right now I'm kind of saving that for my snow effects because I got a lot of that stuff to do. Yeah, I'm sorry about the whole stripey thing there on the palette camera, but that's just, I don't have the gray of my homemade wet palette to work with. But we're just gonna throw some stuff out here. There's some of that Blood Angels red. We even just throw a few containers. See, as soon as you throw some stuff out there, that goes away. You know, actually, let's use some of this clear yellow right here. How's that? First things first, I will do. Let's grab some of this pearl white. Pearl white, sorry, not pearl white. Let's see what we can do here on these headlights. The idea is it's white, but it's got this little bit of pearlescence to it, which is also not metallic. I'm trying to avoid that. Here, let's just get a little bit of this here, and you can see I've got, this brush doesn't have a super fine tip on it. I actually hope that it gives me a little bit of texture in there. Whole idea behind that is once I go over it with the gloss stuff, then maybe it'll look like the interior of the typical headlight that has, oh gosh, what would you say? Here, I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to prep these with some of the pearl white, and then we'll go over the top of them. Those dry a little bit. Sorry, what I'm going to actually do here too, see if I can't play around with a little bit of the license plate there. I'm actually going to take some of the pearl white, mix it with that. Yeah, not all license plates are white, obviously, but here, let's go with something like this. Maybe I'll put in, again, some kind of vanity license plate or whatever. I don't want this to be yet another thing that's white. think it's time to maybe not have more white shapes in here, or something that's grayish white. So I'll just stop right there with that. Now, let's say that's maybe dry enough for now. Let's take some of the contrast. We're going to mix it with a little touch of that clear yellow. Is that on screen for you? I think it is. I need to thin that a little more. Ah, that's about it. Here, I'm trying to take some. Yeah, see what that's doing there? I didn't want it to be perfectly even. I didn't necessarily want to paint it as a, well, basically that classic gemstone look. This is what I was hoping that I would get. Yeah, just about like that. That's why I used the contrast paint instead of just painting over it with the red paint, because the hope was that it would cover a portion of that. So that worked out pretty well. Now here, again, sorry, my voice is just, it's been a really long day, and there's been way too much activity for today. Way too much talking. So I'm just gonna, a little bit of my art coat out there. You can see there's even a little bit of red that's gotten in that. Let us get in here. That should be dry. And just get myself some glossiness over those headlights. So, yeah, see that? You can even see it now reflected in there just a little bit. So that's pretty neat. That's still not dry yet, so what I will do, I'm going to go see what I can't mess around with on the license plate thing here. See if I can find me a brush, and I'll just use some blue liner here. And of course that's going to be blocked up, so we'll just do that. Let's see what we can put on here. And we'll just, I don't know, just gonna start writing letters until I see something that I like. I'm just gonna see if this will fit. There we are, another S. Didn't think you were going to get a freehand thing out of this, did you? Looks like you are. And I'm going to let that fade a little bit. And let's give it the numeral 1 there. Yeah, let's take a little bit of the not maiden flesh. It's, well, it's the, oh, what would you say, the Valley Hill equivalent of a maiden flesh. So, classic 1. Let's just say that's good enough as we wait for, it looks like that's dry enough on the taillight things here to do one here. Yeah, that's good. That'll work. You can see how it's tracking the lights here that I'm using in the area. So, boom, there you go. That's good. Now, as I have to give that some time to dry, now I'm going to start fooling around with these powders here. But we can just talk about these a little bit as I clear out the area. I don't know how much of this I'll need because we already did plenty of rust techniques. So that one's going to go off to the side for now. But ones like this, for sure. Where's my, yeah, green earth. I think we used both of these, the ancient earth, green earth. So let's put that over there. Now, there's the yellow sands and all that stuff. Maybe I'll put this on there. I just want to see what happens with these other ones first. Now, I'm going to use the same old craft brushes to apply this. But what I'm looking for, yep, there you go. I don't know if you can see a little dust cloud coming off of there. So this is one that I used to apply the powders on the last vehicle, the one that I showed you in the example. Now, let's see if we can get these out onto the palette without spilling half the container. So there's part of it. And as always with these things, just a couple of deals here. You really don't want to get this on your clothes or on your floor, especially a carpet that is white or lighter colored, because they kind of just stay there. I mean, think of them like pastels. I would also not suggest eating the dust here. That's probably not the best plan in the world, just like pastel dust. You really don't want to see these tiny little particles. You really don't want to have that in your system there. Now, you could wear a mask or whatever. I can't do that because otherwise you couldn't hear me. But nothing says that you couldn't do it. So, while that dries, we're just going to stay away from there. We're going to stay away from those areas right there. But what I am going to start to do is, look at that. Look at the difference that makes right off the bat on that undercarriage there. Huge difference. Now, to seal this, couple of different ways. Secret Weapon Miniatures makes basically, well, a sealer. It's called Pigment Fixer. So does Make Ammo. So do a whole lot of other folks. So now those work a little differently. You would have to paint those on. What I will do with these is I just start to brush on some of the, this is again the, not rust, it's the dark earth color. See, it's already got kind of a rusty color to it. We gotta be gentle here. Can't really rush this. Now, the other thing I'll say, see, you can see it there on the lighter parts of this, that you could also do the thing with the rubbing alcohol, and you could sort of wash that down into the crevices. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be doing that on any of these vehicles. It's something that I do on my World War II stuff. Maybe I'll be able to do it on one of these. But I certainly have more World War II vehicles coming. There's a bunch. I got a bunch of new things from Warlord and from Trenchwork, so we're going to have a lot of fun with those. Again, put plenty of rust down in the payload area there, so I don't think we have to go crazy with more of that. This application here also serves to maybe smooth out some of the rust in some areas. So let's get into something else. Now this is more of a dirt kind of a thing here. Now even in this bed here, that's gonna almost still translate as being a mud or a rust color. So maybe won't do too much of that, but it's gonna start to work its way here onto the running board. Now I would love to have footprints or the cut leaves or whatever on the running board here. But I don't think that's going to be what's desired on this. So we won't do that. But we are going to start to mix the two together. Not sure if you could see that, because obviously I've got some things in the way, but it's taking the dark earth, or the green earth, sorry, and the ancient earth. We're starting to mix those together, because hey, you can do that. You can do that. Now here, let's go with earth stuff. Look at what that does to that wheel well right there. It totally changes that hubcap and everything. Look at this. It gives us a little extra shape right there. Look at that. I could paint that in too. It's again, sorry about that. It really depends what it is that you want to do. There's something about the powders, a little bit of a texture that they give. What is it that I say all the time? Nothing replicates nature better than nature, and well, representing dust with dust has its advantages. See, we can even layer these a little bit. Look at that. This one I wasn't super worried about lots of dust effects and everything because there's already so much going on with that classic powder blue color scheme. Let's see what we can do here. Look at that. Just lots of fun stuff here. Now, you can see when I tap that, some of the stuff comes off. And even when you spray seal this, some of it might get blown off too in the process, or it'll change the texture a little bit. That's the other downside of powders, potentially, is that happens. They don't quite, when you seal those, they're not quite going to have the same look as they did when you first applied them. Once again, see, looking for some dust there. Yes, but I'm not going to hit those headlights there. I'm going to leave those alone. Definitely leave those alone. But I had fun with this one. Now the other ones, it's not that those won't be fun. We'll try some of them, but they're more, I guess, a modern day type vehicle. Not quite the nooks and crannies of this one here. But boy, yeah, I really had some fun with this. I will try, as I've been trying to do lately, get you a little more of a view of the finished miniature, some pictures in the closing credits. I'm going to try and do more with not my carousel, what was it, the turntable that I have. I think that might be fun to see a miniature that way. It's instead of just the still images, something about a kind of a twirling image gives it a little more, it's a little more 3D than just a photograph, and you get to kind of see all angles at once. Look at that. Now this is what I was hoping would happen. See how we've got that light sandwiched in between the two dark areas all along this? So that really gives it, I like that. I was hoping that would happen. Wasn't sure. Now if I had used, say, the sandy stuff, that was pretty much guaranteed that because it's so light. See how that helps to really give us a lot of different effects instead of just only a rusted effect or a chipped effect. I think on this door, you can see I added some sky blue in places here. See that right on that door there? I don't know why, but I just felt like I wanted to have some difference between that and the turquoise. Now, notice what's happening there. I'm trying to break up some of the rust with the dust. Look at that right there. Maybe, some of this has been kicked up here. Look at that. Yeah, now I know why. Well, I always knew why Justin loved finding his old vehicles. I mean, he loves to find one, just runs across one. He will take that camera and he will take as many pictures of it as he can, so that it's there for some future day, future reference. Maybe even making a future product to match that really cool effect that he saw. And again, this is all just this is basically fake rust and fake dust. This is sort of the layman's version right here. This is not by no means an expert's version of it, but I think most people, they could really live with something like this as their result. So as I move through with this, I've got another new army series that's starting, and actually I just now, and probably a lot of you have seen that, I guess Sisters of Battle are slated for November. I do not know if the Osiarchs or the new Tomb Kings are also slated for that time. Something tells me that they are probably some kind of holiday release, I would guess. Which means I'm already starting to try and clear out space for those, and just not just for army painting stuff, but for one-off things, for YouTube lives. Of course, there's the Warcry stuff, the Cypher Lords, and actually I've also, well, there's more Lord of the Rings to come, because hey, I got more armies to paint there, and some really fun effects too on basing, stuff like Harad. But yeah, I got some things planned for you that I think you might have some fun with. Oh, look at that. See, that's the one thing it's hard to do with paint, is to get that, I mean, literally like dust particles in there. Now, the other thing I could do is to have the sand and gravel glue and sort of put this in there, or sometimes actual dirt, or things like tile grout. Yeah, there's nothing quite like actual dust piled up right in there. So very fun. Thanks again for watching this, everybody. Now, if you can, throw a like on there. It always helps with YouTube likes it. I like it. Everybody likes it. And if you want to subscribe also for those times when I'm doing things that are YouTube lives or whatever, that's always good. Here, let's get a little of this dust over the license plate there and some on the bumper there. There we go. Yeah, it makes that tailgate look a little more used, I think. Alright, so there you have it. There's your Mad Max Classic powder blue pickup truck. And stay tuned for the next one.